Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the teenpro podcast. As you can tell, I have a new mic, so no more bad quality audio. You can actually hear me loud and clear and crisp today, and I'm very glad to be able to do that. So today I interviewed Lauren Krakauscas, one of the 4 co-founders of Freaker USA. And if you do not know Freaker USA, please go check out their website right now. See what their product is, watch a couple of their videos. You will appreciate this podcast so much more if you know what we're talking about. And I promise you, you won't be bored when you look at their stuff. They have the most unique culture ever. So go check out their website. There are links in the description or in the post below. And this episode was just so much fun for me to record. It was an awesome conversation. In the first 10 minutes alone, we talk about Kickstarter, grilled cheese parties, and Shark Tank. So I promise you, you won't be bored. And stay tuned to the very end because I have an exciting announcement to make about Freaker USA. And I'll just give you a little hint, free stuff. So stay tuned to the end, and I'm very excited to present this interview to you. So I'm here with Lauren Krakauskas in the headquarters of Freaker USA. So Lauren, could you just talk real quick about what led you to working with Freaker and how that all went?
Yeah, so Zach, the CEO and the main founder, is my housemate, actually. And one day he came up to me and asked me if I wanted to quit my job and work on this project with him. And all logic aside, I just kind of said, yeah, that sounds nice. I was working at a job where I was actually getting paid a decent amount. I don't think I'm still don't pay myself as much as I was making at this other job. But it seemed like a good idea at the time, and I still stand by it because it's never going to be boring, which is something that I can't say about not working for yourself. You know, going out and applying for a job and going through the basic motions, there's always this kind of a threat that you might fall into a ditch of just monotony. That's what I was always scared of anyway. And being an entrepreneur and starting your own thing and watching it grow, it's not going to be boring. It can be scary, and it can be frustrating, and it can be heart-wrenching and exhilarating, but it's never monotonous, which is kind of what led me to this path.
Great. So you guys did a Kickstarter which raised $62,000, which, by the way, congrats. That's amazing. So what led you to starting that Kickstarter campaign, and how did you guys market that where you could get so much money?
Oh, well, thank you. Kickstarter now is a lot different than when we did it. I'd like to point out that we did the Kickstarter campaign in its first year of being alive. And so nobody really knew what Kickstarter was. So that was an interesting and really unique experience of getting to explain the whole concept to everybody. But we ended up deciding to do a Kickstarter. We knew that we wanted to have our own business and start a company and try this whole concept out. But we weren't really sure what investors did or what they wanted from us or how much power they would have over us. Or, we just kind of had a murkiness about the whole situation. And I know that they're very, they're not evil people by any means. We just didn't totally understand their purpose. And not having somebody telling us what to do was obviously a huge factor in wanting to start a company. So we decided to do a Kickstarter, and yeah, we did pretty well. We spent a lot of time thinking about what we would like to watch and what we, on the other side of the coin, as the viewer, would be interested in seeing, and who we would want to support, and what kind of details that would include. And so we did. We ended up raising 62 or 3, something around that. We raised some money. And then we bought a box truck house with that money, and a box truck, and then we turned it into a house and drove around the country and threw grilled cheese parties for strangers, and it was the least business decision in the entire world, and this is probably exactly why we were murky about investors, because there's no investor in the entire planet that would tell us that was an okay or decent or good idea.
Yeah, that's great. So the grilled cheese parties, I think that's one of the most unique things I've ever heard. I think it's awesome. Do you have any interesting stories that happened on that trip? It was around the country, right?
Yeah, it was around the entire country. The concept of doing a grilled cheese party was we were trying to take it back to breaking bread with your neighbor. And since we were new and nobody had ever heard of us, we were like, well, you're kind of our neighbor, I guess, if you think about it enough. So let's break bread and here, have some food and let's just chat it up. Stories. Yeah, there was a bunch of stories. We had spent all of our Kickstarter money on the box truck and the trip, so we were sleeping in truck stops and getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning and making our little smoothies and doing our little stretches on, just in parking lots across the country. And the looks, I wish I could say on radio, what the facial expressions that we got in different states and different, our little mini cultures, how they reacted to it differently was so interesting and super cute.
Cool. Yeah. So then you guys, a few years later, went on Shark Tank, which I also think is really cool. How did you guys get on Shark Tank? Were you approached or did you audition? What was the process and what was your goal in being on Shark Tank?
Shark Tank contacted us directly after the Kickstarter campaign had launched. And they asked us to be on, and I think I found out later that it's a really long application process, and it's pretty strenuous, and so to be approached is something really special, which we didn't really think about at the time, because we had never seen the show or knew anything about it, really. So they approached us and asked us to go on the show, and we said no, because we read over some of the contracts, and we're like, this looks scary, I don't think we're ready, and it was a great decision. We weren't ready, we had been alive for 6 months and we were still figuring some things out, so it was a really good decision. But then they called again a year later, so I think we were about a year and a half old, and we said, okay, yeah, let's see what happens. And we went on for promotional purposes. We have a product that is not self-explanatory, so it's a one-size-fits-all knit insulator. Which, it sounds like, people would get it, but the fact that you can put the same insulator on a can and then also a fifth of whiskey is surprisingly a hard concept to get across in just straight marketing without showing people. So we used it as a 7-minute national primetime television ad that was super free. It was so free. And it was incredible, the business that came from it, and if you've seen the episode, you know that Zach is beeping and booping and doing somersaults and making jokes and kind of flirting it up, and it was all a pretty calculated decision to make it memorable and have it all fall in line with branding rather than trying to paw for money. I'm not even sure if we knew what we would do with the money at that point. So it worked out really well, exactly like we kind of wanted it to. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And how much of that was scripted? And how much did Zach just wing it and be himself?
None of it was scripted. He had an idea that he wanted to be silly, and that he didn't want to have any pauses. So Shark Tank, and generally any film like that, like any kind of reality situation, it's really highly edited down. So it's a little bit scary, and that you film for about an hour and then they edit it down to 5 minutes. And if you give, enough content, then really if you're on the editing side of the coin, you can tell whatever story you would like to, regardless of how true that story is. And so if you notice in his episode where he was beep, 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 boop, 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 that was mainly to not give any silent pauses. If you watch Shark Tank, you'll know that there's always that, doom music coming in, and dun, 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 and somebody looks terrified, and so who knows how realistic that is in the turn of events, but we kind of took some steps to prevent it, and it turned out pretty silly. Yeah, it was really great.
Cool. So I love the way your company markets itself, and lots of people might look at Freaker and be like, oh, that's just a bunch of crazy kids just playing around. But actually, your website is very good. Your videos are like top-notch quality, even though they might be a little bit silly to some people. They're really good quality. So how do you guys approach like getting all the business side good, but also keeping your culture of like just being freaky or whatever?
Yeah, I think it goes back to why we wanted to start our own business is what would we like to see? What would we like to buy? None of us are the best at being consumers. We're all kind of floating around in our own worlds, and so when we look at advertisements or look at marketing or look at other brands, I mean, personally, it takes a lot to impress me or like get my attention, just because we're so flooded with marketing in general. And so it's always that challenge of, well, what would get my attention? What would I like to see? And then going out and doing that and making that happen and seeing if that was also something that somebody else would like to see, and just kind of testing those grounds out. So as we grow, business is business, and there's definitely that side of it that's very solid and concrete. But the marketing is where I fall in, and it's so fun. It's so fun, and it's always this weird social experiment where you're just kind of trying to poke people a little bit and see if they're on the same page. And if they're not, then that's absolutely fine too. But yeah, it's kind of creating something that you haven't seen before.
Cool. So how did you get interested into marketing?
I read a book when I was 15 that made marketing sound like this evil empire of just these like doomed people that had scorches, and they roamed the earth and they were hiding in plain sight, and it kind of interested me a lot. But I went to school for geopolitics and things that are completely irrelevant. But marketing is, again, it's so saturated in our everyday lives, whether or not we realize it, and it's always just been an interesting sector of, can you see through it? Do you know what they're doing? Is it, how is it veiled? What kind of spin are they going to put on this new medication that nobody really needs? And am I falling for it? And kind of playing in that world and those confines is an interesting experiment for me, at least.
Cool. So you went to college for geopolitics. What is your view on college and whether you should go or not? What you should major in? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I hope I don't, find myself in a downward spiral here. So I'm going to say all the really positive things about college before I give my critiques. I didn't study anything that's relevant to what I ended up doing and my big life strokes. But college did teach me a lot. It teaches you how people interact and how they function under pressure. It teaches you about deadlines, and it teaches you about, excelling, and then, the average of something. It also teaches you that a lot of people don't want to be there, which is really, really shocking to me. But education is probably the most important thing that anybody can strive for. But I think there's this misconception of what education is and what education is supposed to be. The want to learn and to make yourself a more capable human being and to find your goals and then set out to see how you achieve them. I mean, it's all education, but it doesn't have to mean going to a fancy college and getting yourself into unspeakable debt. Like when I was 17, I had no concept of what $200,000 was. Like that meant nothing to me. And so to make this jump from this very structured high school reality into a university where you're signing up for things that you don't totally comprehend. And even if you do, I think it's really good to have a plan of why you want to be there. In my experience, a lot of my peers were there because their parents expected them to. It was just kind of it was just what you were supposed to do. But I think a lot of people would benefit greatly for taking a couple of years off, maybe a year or two, and maybe travel, work a little bit, save up some money, go discover new things, scare yourself, find yourself. And that, I don't mean that in the hippy-dippy, go meditate on a mountain for 6 days, but, find what really, really interests you. And then if that requires a university degree, absolutely go for it. But having a lot of debt without a clear reason to be there other than an expectation is not the best idea, because the myth is that you graduate from college and automatically are handed a super high-paying job, and it's just simply not true. I mean, at one point it may have been true, and maybe in certain fields it's true, but for the freedom to do where your life takes you, it's not always a happy ending just because you have a college degree. And I think that our society will do a lot bigger things once we realize that that is a myth, and using higher university education more pointedly and using it as a more focused thing might, really progress our youth.
Cool. So, since you did not get a degree in marketing, how did you start teaching yourself? Or did you teach yourself, or did you learn from other people? How did you start teaching yourself what you use now in your job?
How did I teach myself what I do now? A lot of marketing to me is really intuitive. Again, it's like, what would I like to see out in the world, and what do I see less of, and what I would like to see, who's doing it, and how are they doing it, and how effectively are they doing it, and can I do it better? It's a constant journey, which is what I really love about marketing. You have a lot of creativity involved, but there's this set-in goal. And I'm 27. I was on the cusp of the generation when the internet happened, if you can say that the internet happened. And so I had an advantage there in that I had kind of grown up with the internet, and I knew its basic, form and function and structure and how to use it, and, really grasp it as a tool, which I think teens now, they have an amazing advantage that they probably don't fully grasp. There's a lot of industries that haven't had a smooth transition into the age of the internet. And teens now, they grew up with it. They're surrounded by it. They were born into it. They understand it, which means that they can shape it. And so people always say that the youth is the future. The future belongs to our teens. But I don't think it's ever been as true as it is right now because of this tool that's been handed to them. And they just really know how to use it and hopefully abuse it in all the good ways.
So, what would you recommend to teenagers nowadays who want to go out and make something on the internet, just put it out there, and see who responds?
Yeah, I think now we're in this huge transition of everything shifting to the internet. And again, teens have an incredible advantage that I really hope that they understand and recognize. And I think once they recognize how far ahead they are already just by being alive at this point in time, like maybe that'll give some encouragement to make this transition really smooth. Like if you see something that you think can work better, it's probably very true. Everything is in the digital age, but there's so many things that are lagging behind. Or if you see something that hasn't been done before, there are a whole plethora of worlds that we can't even imagine, and the internet's so new to all of the rest of us. Wait, what was the question again? I got really off topic.
Oh, no, that was good. Just how teens can use the internet in what they want to learn, what they want to do, broadcast themselves.
Okay, yeah. The tools at your disposal. You need the will, but the tools to get it done are definitely there. You don't necessarily... So 20 years ago, if you had an idea and wanted to start a store and, had some kind of entrepreneurial tendency, you would need to go to the bank and get a loan and maybe find a retail space and then pay a lot of money for this retail space downtown and then have open hours and closed hours and employees and this entire structure that is pretty much irrelevant now. Like if you have an idea that you want to, a new invention, if you want to, say you want to knit felt hats for chickens. The felt hats for chickens is your calling. You don't need to go through any of those processes. You can just throw something up on Etsy, which is like 13 cents a listing or something ridiculous like that. And one of the greatest things about the internet is that if you think it's a good idea, it's just a matter of will, of how hard you try to find other people that agree with you that it's a good idea. And chances are they're out there. Like, there are some nutty things out there, and there's a community for them because of this new tool of communication that hopefully teens don't take for granted.
Great. So, I noticed on your website you had a blog post about Threadless and how you did a campaign with Threadless, and I like Threadless. I've never actually bought a shirt from them, but I'm sure I will at some point. I think it's really cool. So can you talk about that and how that went?
Yeah, Threadless is one of those things, again, because of the advent of the internet, Threadless can thrive, and it's so incredible, just the concept. For anybody that doesn't know the concept of Threadless, it is everyday designers submitting to this one website, and then the users vote on whether or not they would like to see the design come into fruition in a product, namely a t-shirt, but they do branch out. I have so much respect for everything that they do, 100%. And they're all young and, have their little factory and their little warehouse, and they're all based in Chicago, and it's I expect to see a lot more companies run like Threadless is, and harnessing the power of the internet and a broad base of the crowd to propel them forward. And I had a thought.
Yeah. So, how's your experience with Threadless and having a campaign with them? Wasn't it like where people could design a bottle? Maybe. Okay. If you weren't involved with that, that's completely fine. It's just wondering.
I don't remember the details. I do remember having a lot of people submit their designs for what they would like to see on a Freaker, and the entire concept of harnessing, all these communities that are meshing and merging, and it was a really incredible thing to be a part of in the middle eye of the storm.
Neat. So, how do you get your designs right now? Do you have a graphic art team in-house who design?
Yeah, we have. So our company is half creative, half business, and we have a couple in-house designers. It's a really funny. The creative and the business kind of mesh together, and it's one big boiling pot. So it's not specific departments, but we're trying really hard to make them more specific. And we'll see how well that works. Like, our accountant has an art degree, so it's pretty hard to differentiate the two. But we do have designers on staff, and they sit there all day and just do their little drawings, and it's fun and games were had by all.
Cool. So, for anyone who does not know Freaker USA, their culture is like really cool and creative and wacky. And could you sum up the culture of Freaker in a couple sentences or a paragraph?
The culture of Freaker, it's all inviting. That was kind of the concept behind the grilled cheese parties, is that anybody should come out and we'll feed you. And and even the name itself, Freaker, it's something that's a little bit makes your head tilt. Did she just say what I think she said? We get a lot of emails going to spam mail because of it, but overall, it was a really interesting decision to name a company Freaker. Overall, it's very fun and colorful and super hyper inviting. I really want everybody to feel like they can have this little refuge. And it's interesting having a product and then having that product be part of a lifestyle brand. The thought behind that was that when you see this thing, it's not, oh, there's a one-size-fits-all knit insulator. It's like, oh, there's that thing. Those kids are nuts. Okay, I can do this. I can do this also. And we throw a lot of events. We're going to be out at the Battleship Park this weekend and have our grilled cheese truck, and we have a little roof for people to dance on. But if you don't want to dance, that's fine too. Anything goes, which is absolutely the best.
Awesome. So, what is the most interesting reaction you've gotten to the Freaker name and brand?
the most interesting reaction we've gotten, a lot of head tilts. But I get a lot of an older generation, maybe in their 50s and 60s, feeling really sentimental and really nostalgic over this brand, which is funny because we're all in our 20s and we don't have, a very personal connection to the age of the early 70s. None of us were alive at the time, and we obviously weren't there to experience it, but we have a lot of people get really nostalgic over it, and I think that it reminds them of this other place and time where there was this hope that things were changing and the flowered children were coming out to play and that they were going to change the world. And that's arguable on whether or not that happened. I am pretty optimistic in that they changed a lot more than they give themselves credit for. But that was a surprise to me because I don't think that was what we were going for at all. We didn't think that we had been inspired by, really anything that anybody else had done in the business world. But especially this very specific Ken Kesey subgroup was a surprise. But we've gotten it a lot, and I'm really, really flattered by it.
That's awesome. So, how many people said this was not a good idea, and who did you decide to ignore?
Well, I don't think anybody told us that starting this company was a bad idea. I just don't think that anybody really knew that we were going to actually do it. I had a job when Zach asked me to start this project with him, and when I quit, I was telling my boss kind of what I was doing, and she said that it was... she didn't use the word bad or idea, but she kind of explained to me that I was going to be really poor for a very long time, and this was going to make my life really frustrating, and it was going to be a lot of hard work with not a lot of payout, and that I was really risky, and I was probably going to fail, and she was right about a lot of it, except for the failure part, which was to her surprise. And what she didn't tell me was how satisfying it is to have this thing and watch it grow and watch it. A company is kind of like a baby, and it definitely has growing pains, and you put in long hours, and it can poop everywhere, and it can make your life really tough, and if you don't feed it, it'll die, but people still have babies, and they still love them, and we still have a company, and I don't have any children, so maybe I'm wrong, but my dog is here with me, and so that kind of counts.
Cool. So do you have, I guess we've kind of talked about this already, but do you just have any advice for teens who are just trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, and they feel like they're stuck in school all day and they're not really passionate about that, and math and that. And so what would you suggest they start doing to find something fun and creative that they can do?
Again, I think travel is really invigorating. The best advice that I could give to anybody, teenager or not, is to find what you like to do, because it doesn't even have to be what you like to do, just what you like in general, what interests you, and it's different for everybody. And so giving blanket advice is always a really strange thing, because I don't think one piece of advice will work for any large group of people. Everybody is wired so incredibly differently that, what inspires me to get through my day is completely different than what would inspire, some 12-year-old boy in Minnesota. But maybe not, who knows? But everybody is so, so different that finding what really gets you going is probably the most important thing that anybody can do. And so for teenagers especially, again, with the internet, there's this whole big resource of research that was not available even 15 years ago. And so I still suggest travel because it's what I know of how to lift the spirits and find new things and kind of scare yourself into some kind of action. And but it really can take any form.
Great. So, do you have any last words to say before we end?
Back to the internet. Back to the internet. I want to say a couple of things about Kickstarter and the concept of Kickstarter, and I think it's an incredible use and a realization of harnessing the power of the internet. That was revolutionary idea. And it's not just because of the funding platform side of it all. Kickstarter and the concept of crowdsourcing is why we didn't have to go find an investor, and why we are where we are today is because of the crowd and because of crowdsourcing and the entire platform. But Kickstarter's more than that. And when I say Kickstarter, I mean the entire crowdsourcing community. There's a bunch of them now. But it's not only for funding. It's this weird type of democracy where people vote on whether or not they agree if your idea is a good one. And it can be kind of scary. You're really putting yourself out there, but it's an incredible experience, and it's an incredible way to find out if there is a community there that will support you. And chances are that there is. And even if you don't make your funding goal, the feedback that you get from that kind of community is entirely different than the feedback that you would get if you went to a bank and asked for a loan. It's a lot more constructive. It's a lot more critical in a really helpful way. And it's a lot more peer-to-peer, which is what I think a lot of businesses especially need, rather than, this hierarchy of power and, the money hierarchy that just naturally exists, needs to be broken down just a little bit when it comes to the new guys and starting your own thing. The people at the top got there for entirely different reasons, always. And there's no two very successful anythings that had the same journey. And so to pass down on a very strict hierarchy of who to listen to and who not to is, I think it can be a little bit destructive. So Kickstarter and crowdsourcing, and they're really helping take care of that problem. And for us, it was a confirmation that we were on a track that people were generally interested in, which we didn't totally know before. We knew it, but it was a really good, concrete, final stamp that keep doing what you're doing. It's going to be okay. You have a community, and you're going to find support no matter where you look.
That's cool. And also, it's all good and well if people say they like your product, but it's when they give you money that you actually have something that's good. Well, thank you very much. That was excellent. It was nice meeting you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I enjoyed the interview so much with Lauren. She's really such a genuine and kind person, and as further proof of that, she actually gave me 2 boxes of Freakers when I left. So I am able to give you guys Freakers if you want them, which you should because they're awesome. So if you share this podcast on Facebook or Twitter, please comment below and I will send you a Freaker. There are also pictures below, so if you want, you can pick which one you want, first come, first serve, and I'll send it to you, or just say mystery, and I will just send you whichever one I think you might like. So please do that. I promise you'll like it. It's free stuff. I won't charge you anything for shipping, so you guys should really do that. And once you get your Freaker, you should take a picture and put it somewhere on teenpro because I'd love to see how you guys are using them. One last thing about the Freaker giveaway. You have to do this in the next week. After September 19th, I will not be accepting any requests for Freakers because I can't keep doing this into eternity. So do this today or very soon, or you might forget and run out of time, and that would be terrible. So please do this right now. Well, thank you very much for listening today. And if you're not listening on teenpro.net right now, please go there and check out our other podcasts. You can look at our blog, join the community. It's just an awesome place to hang out. At least I'm working on it being an awesome place to hang out. And if you guys join, it will be even better. So yep, or if you want, send me an email at hannah@teenpro.net, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions you guys have about anything. So I'm Hannah from teenpro, and thank you for listening. For listening.